All right, the recording has begun. Good morning, everyone. This is the C4 Metro Subcommittee. The date is June 11th. Your co-chairs are Commissioner Savas and Mayor Buck. Co-chairs, the meeting is yours.
Good morning, everyone. Paul Savas, Clackamas County Commissioner, co-chair of the C4 Metro Subcommittee. I'm going to pass over to my colleague, Mayor Joe Buck.
All right, thanks, Commissioner Savas. Good morning, everyone. I'm Joe Buck, Mayor of Lake Oswego, co-chair of this committee. Well, we are in order, and we are going to start this morning with some presentation from JPAC and JPAC update. And basically, what we have on the upcoming agenda for tomorrow is what we're going to be talking about here this morning, which is the RUFA Step 2, the package allocation options, which I know some of us we just talked about last week at the big C4 meeting. And then we're also talking about this the U.S. Department of Transportation certification of Metro as the metropolitan planning organization, and we're talking about that at JPAC tomorrow and here this morning as well. So I think we're gonna start. Grace is here. We really appreciate her being here and is joined by her colleague Jean this morning as well. And Jean, I don't know if we've had you here before, of course, I think maybe.
This might be my first time with all of you. So yeah, I started at Metro in January, but I've worked in the region for quite a long time, a few decades. So it's nice to see you all. Thanks for having us here.
Oh, it's great to have you here.
Great. Are folks seeing a slideshow on the screen yet?
Yes.
Perfect. Well, thank you, members of C4 Metro Subcommittee, for having me this bright and early Wednesday morning. My name is Grace Cho. I'm a principal transportation planner, and I'm leading the Regional Flexible Fund allocation process this cycle. And I'm here to give a few updates about the Step 2 competitive allocation. And with a bit to cover, I'll just go ahead and just get started. So to start off, a bit of good news that Metro staff's most recent estimate of the regional flexible funds available in the 2028 through 2030 cycle has actually increased from what we initially had estimated at about $150 to $153 million back in spring of 2024, up to $161 million as of our most recent update revenue estimate. This is due to two factors. One is unallocated carryover, and then the second is an increase in our congestion mitigation and air quality funds, also known as CMAQ, which is one of the sources of federal transportation dollars that make up the regional flexible funds. The unallocated carryover represents the difference between what was initially estimated in regional flexible fund revenues and the actual amount of regional flexible funds to result through the annual appropriations process. Since 2022, Metro's mildly conservative forecast has added up to about a $6 million increase over that period of time. Typically, unallocated carryover gets put into the pot for the next regional flexible fund cycle. So it's kind of timely because we are in the midst of the next cycle for these funds. Somewhat similarly for CMAQ, we received a more recent appropriation of CMAQ funds this past spring, and the estimate was a little under, and we actually saw an increase by about $700,000 this year. Using this most recent CMAQ appropriation, Metro staff has updated our forecast to reflect this increased amount moving forward, looking annually. So that increased amount is now resulting in an approximate additional $4.5 million, which is making up that about $10 million increase we're seeing in the entire program overall. So with this increased capacity with the entire regional flexible funds, Metro staff is proposing to use these funds to support the new debt service to result from the bond proposal that has been put forward, and if it is approved and adopted. These increased funds, some of which are available now, will cover the early year debt service repayments, and ultimately that helps to free up some step 2 funds that we had anticipated in the 28 through 30 cycle for debt service. And it actually allows us to be able to increase the amount that we will allocate from our previous estimate of $42 million now up to $49 million. I might have gone through that a little clunky, so I'll leave room for questions about that at the end. But all that to be said is that with this increase, we could better support both the new bond debt service schedule, as well as being able to support an increased step 2 allocation. So now that I've shared the revenue estimate updates, which is kind of a broad overarching update, let's transition into talking a little bit about step 2. So as a brief reminder, the desired outcome for the competitive step 2 allocation is to make progress towards the goals identified in the 2023 Regional Transportation Plan. And the other objective being to meet the objectives set forward as part of this cycle's program direction. So how we're doing that is by developing a step 2 allocation package, which incorporates and balances across 5 components, which are reflective of those 2 core desired outcomes, the RTP goals, as well as the various objectives that were set forth in our program direction. The 5 components are listed on the screen just briefly. That includes our program direction objectives, the outcomes evaluation results, the recently completed public comment, illustrative concepts, which is essentially the feedback and input that we received last month when we came to the committees requesting just different ideas or concepts we should be building these packages around. And then lastly, the coordinating committees and City of Portland priorities, which thank you, committees. We received those last week from here. The 3 different, in applying those 5 different components, or I should say at least 4 at the time of this body of work, Metro staff developed 3 different allocation package options. For the purposes of discussion, I just want to note that again, the County Coordinating Committee and City of Portland priorities had not been factored since those were received a little after the time of when we were developing these options and bringing it forward for the TPAC packet. We used an assessment rubric essentially to be able to apply those 4 components. And I just want to note that if there's a desire to really get into the details of the thinking about how we pulled those 3 options together, I believe as part of the packet for today for Metro C4 Subcommittee, you received the same materials that TPAC did, so it's included as attachment 1. So I'm going to go briefly over the 3 different options, starting with the first of the 3 allocation package options, coming in at a total of about $47.8 million. Allocation package 1, option 1, emphasizes high performance across the 4 components with some additional focus on the overall technical evaluation score. The 9 projects that are comprised in this option are all within the top half of the scoring in the technical evaluation. The 9 projects in option 1 also meet more than half of the program direction objectives and the other considerations that were brought forward as part of the May discussions. And I would say that of the 3 options that are being presented, this option 1 is the most closely aligned with what we heard through TPAC and JPAC last month in May to build a package around the technical evaluation results. The second step 2 allocation package option, coming in at a little under $49 million, also emphasizes high performance in the technical evaluation, as well as meeting a number of the program direction objectives. But it takes into consideration a little further some input received at JPAC last month in regards to some of the concepts. And in particular, option 2 includes step 2 applications that complement either recently built, currently active, or projects in consideration as, or I should say, projects proposed as part of the step 1A.1 bond proposal. And then lastly, the step 2 allocation package option 3, again, continues to emphasize high performance in the outcomes evaluation, the meeting a number of program direction objectives, as well as the other considerations noted in last month's conversations. What differentiates allocation package option 3 is that there's a little more emphasis towards the public comment by including the highest rated step 2 application that also performed highly in the technical evaluation and program direction objectives. So it's just that slightly little bit of tug on the public comment when you think about having multiple levers that you're kind of working with. So I do want to note of the 3 allocation package options, option 3 is the only one to come in just slightly above $49 million. So that's just something for consideration. So at the June 6th TPAC meeting, which was just past Friday, the committee received essentially the same presentation that I'm providing here today, and the input that TPAC gave is what's being carried forward for the step 2 item when it comes before JPAC at the June 26th meeting. So I just want to note the interesting split in schedule. It will not be part of tomorrow's agenda. But just going over briefly what input we heard from TPAC members. Different TPAC members had different preferences in terms of the different options and provided comments as to what modifications they would desire to see in a staff recommendation in efforts to get behind a different option. Just from what's listed here, I think what you can see is that there isn't quite consensus yet, so there's definitely more work to be done in terms of putting together a staff recommended step 2 allocation package. In addition to the comments regarding preference for the different allocation package options, there were some further comments that were a bit more general in nature about the development of the package options. In particular, there was some comments to see further emphasis placed on the public comment. There was some comments and questions related to the revenue estimates and process in terms of just getting some clarifications. And then lastly, some further comments about having better integration between the bond proposal consideration discussion as well as the step 2 allocation process. So I alluded to this just briefly. With all of this information in mind, just next steps coming ahead in June, Metro staff have been presenting the step 2 allocation package options at the regional committees, and by request, we've been coming to coordinating committees. I just want to note that we are still incorporating the coordinating committee and City of Portland priorities, as well as the input that we're receiving today here at C4, as well as from TPAC last week, and we presented at WCCC earlier in the week. The aim is to actually then come to JPAC at their June 26th meeting with some revised step 2 discussion materials. We're possibly aiming for something on the 17th for our Metro Council work session with some updates, but I think it's still we're still working through some of the feedback that we've received. So then following July, Metro staff will come back with 2 separate resolutions, one of which is the request to take action on the step 2 allocation with the Metro starting point with the step 2 staff recommended allocation package. The aim is to have that step 2 allocation package reflect a balance across all 5 of those components I had noted earlier. However, if the committees don't feel that the staff recommendation package is coming in balance, then both TPAC and JPAC do have the ability to put forward proposed amendments on the request for an action as part of the committee deliberations, and to be able to carry forward a recommended package to the Metro Council. And then just lastly to note, the Metro Council is scheduled to take action on the Step 2 allocation package at their July 31st regular council meeting. So I come with two questions. They've been somewhat the same questions throughout these various presentations about Step 2. Just simply, are there things that Metro staff should know as we get towards building that staff recommended Step 2 allocation package? And among the three package options we've put before you thus far, is there a preferred package option? So maybe those questions should be switched up in nature, but both go hand in hand. So, and with that, that is all I have today.
Thank you so much, Grace. I appreciate it. Colleagues, comments, questions? Utter silence. Grace, what is the the change to the budget you talked about at the beginning of the presentation? What did that, could you just remind us again? I'm sorry. What did that do to the amount of money we have for the Step 2? I forget, where was it?
The simple answer is that it ended up increasing the Step 2 allocation by $7 million, but the additional estimated about $10 million of additional regional flexible funds. It's not a simple straight 10 million into Step 2 pot. We're anticipating utilizing that actually to support the debt service on the new project bond if approved. So if we anticipate that we're beginning bonding as early as federal fiscal year 2026, we would have to anticipate that we'd have, debt repayments going in that same year. And so because some of these funds are available now, we would be able to just apply those into those early years where we had been kind of initially anticipating that we would need to borrow from ourselves in 28 through 30 for some of those early debt service payments. So as a result, that freed up some of that initial funding in 28 through 30 that would be going towards debt service for some of those early years. And therefore, it kind of opened that up to be able to allocate in the Step 2 process. We're still going to have new debt service that we'll be paying for in 28, 29, and 30. I don't want to discount that. It's just that the degree of that amount won't be as high.
Gotcha. And these buckets of projects reflect the increased amount.
Yes, all of them are allocating, well, I should say they're all allocating beyond 42 million. Not all of them are quite at 49. And then I mentioned that one option is a little above $49 million.
Okay, thank you so much. Commissioner Savas.
Yeah, just a few things, some of which we all heard. And Grace, thank you for your presentation. And this is by no means, part of this is no means in your wheelhouse. So I understand that it's more political. So if Councilor Lewis was here today, I would be, asking her, like I typically have asked along the way here, is that how much does this weigh in with regards to other factors considered other than technical and, for lack of a better word, political. And so that's, I would be asking her that question. I think she'd probably give a similar response she has in the past, that the technical scores and evaluations are factored, but not the be all do all. Secondly, the other one that we have always factored in is, whether it's regional equity or it is distribution or allocation, geographically. I know that is not technically or legally on the federal guidelines a factor. That said, And thirdly, what we try to do a little bit in Clackamas, at least with our C4 committee, subcommittee here, or at our greater C4, is make sure we kind of spread some of the projects around so that at some point, some of the outstanding projects in some of the cities get a little bit of a bump from our recommendations. So all to say, with that all said, I just want to close with, it was brought to my attention recently on a different, well, not a similar rough conversation that took place on the step one, was that, being factored in on what either the match is or maybe what a local jurisdiction puts in the pot. And while that, kind of, certainly would influence a project, I just want to point out I wish Oregon City and all others were here today too, but we are who we are today. But I want to point out that Clackamas County is made up of smaller cities with less resources, and Washington County is made up of fewer cities with larger populations and more resources. And of course, Portland's got, a largest population and a lot more resources. So I'm hoping that is ultimately considered and factored in, in what the ultimate outcomes are. And I know that puts you in a tough spot, Grace. You don't need to reply. This is not for Metro staff to reply, but I just want to just get it out there for my colleagues in this meeting here to hear. Well, Mayor, I have nothing else.
Great. Yeah. Thank you, Commissioner. Well, I would, go ahead, Mayor Melch, please.
I just wanted to say I was a little surprised, Grace, that you said that there was not much consensus on these, because when I look back at your summary of the discussion, let me see, I got to go forward another step to bring it back up. The TPAC discussion, it looked like option one was present in just about every committee's recommendation, either option one alone or option one or something else. And so if you add, for your input on that question of which option, I would say based on that, option one looks like the best.
Yeah. Well, that option one, and I mean, just for the Clackamas projects, those, I mean, what CTAC came in with is basically what the C4 body kind of agreed on as well. So kind of an option one or an option three here, Commissioner Savas.
Yeah, just that, if I'm not mistaken, Jamie, if you could correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe what fell off looks apparently below the line is the Oregon City project.
Yeah. Looks like in CTAC had put forth a recommendation of 1 or 3, noting that, the Oregon City project as well. Okay. Okay. If there's nothing else, we'll let Grace get on with it. And Jean, appreciate you both being here.
Yeah, thank you both so much. It's helpful to hear your thoughts today as we head into JPACT at the end of this month and our Metro Council discussion next week. So we look forward to hearing more from the staff from around the region as they're checking in with all of you, check in with your staff that represent you at your TAC committee as well, so they can help advocate and elevate. And Jamie, before we jump to the next, who is Ted, and I've been texting Ted, and he is wrapping up another meeting. So I'm going to text him and let him know we need you now. So he is, I'm just looking and I don't see him here yet in the attendees. So
That is okay. I just
we'll jump to
texted
the
him,
next.
and
Okay.
if this group is amenable, I would love to skip down to the TPAC update and then jump back up to Ted's item.
Yeah, that's good with me if it's good with everyone else.
Fantastic. Jeff, I am going to promote you.
Hello and good morning. Jeff Owen with Clackamas County, Principal Planner and Transportation Planning. Here for a brief TPAC update. In your packet, we do have a TPAC report, and that goes into a little more detail about the average pieces that we touch on every month with traffic safety, with a number of updates, the bulk of which you did just recently cover here with the RUFA Step 2 that you just heard about from Gene and Ted. Sorry, I'm catching up a little bit into the newer packet here that was updated. So the as Grace and Gene just covered a minute ago, TPAC did recently meet last Friday on the 6th, and so some of these issues are still very timely and evolving here into the rest of this month. I would highlight that also not even afternoon, later this morning in a few hours, there is a TPAC workshop that takes on two main items. One is your next item, which I see Ted is just signing here, and that deals with the MPO certification. That will be part of the TPAC workshop in just a few hours. And then the other portion of that meeting here soon is the regional emergency transportation routes effort that's ongoing, that is also being co-led by Metro and the RDPO, the Regional Disaster Preparedness Group. And so that'll be a workshop that happens occasionally on Wednesdays. So major items at TPAC just behind us, as we touched on, were RUFA Step 2 and some of the interstate bridge replacement conversation. They're coming forward for what is called an amendment into the MTIP, the Metropolitan Transportation Improvement Program. And then I would finally maybe just highlight next month, as Grace and Gene were touching on, a big role that TPAC has ahead is trying our best as a TPAC group around the region to put forward a recommendation into JPAC for consideration for both Step 1 of the Regional Flex Fund allocation and Step 2, so the new bond proposal options and Step 2. And so I know we've occupied a good bit of time at your meetings here recently in the spring on those topics, and so that'll be a big portion of our work later this month and into July. So I'll maybe pause there and see if there's any questions about the work at TPAC. This last meeting I was also joined by Laura Turway as the alternate for cities of Clackamas County from Happy Valley. And our next meeting of TPAC is July 10th, just the day before, or sorry, the 11th, just a few days before the next JPAC meeting, where those flexible fund allocation decisions will be made. So I'll pause there. Any questions on the TPAC report?
Any questions? Jeff, is there any way we get that Oregon City project? Do you see any way to get that project in any of these buckets?
Yeah, I think it's possible. I think it'll be hard. And it will take some advocacy, both from staff and leadership. As you may remember, there are a lot of really good project proposals in Step 2. It is a very competitive and oversubscribed funding bucket. I would humbly suggest, I feel like we're starting to get to a place where the top 2 priorities from C4 are feeling fairly safe. They're feeling like they both competed well from technical scoring. They received good public comment, and with your prioritization, I think those top 2 are looking to be a little safer. But that third Oregon City priority, I think it's possible. But there will be lots of discussions among the TPAC staff groups kind of this week, next week, trying our best to help kind of fit as much as we can with all the direction from all the coordinating committees around the region. So I'd say it is possible, and we're trying our best.
Okay, no, that's great. That's optimistic. What would you say is the project that it's in highest competition with?
I would say there's probably a small group of maybe 5 or 6 or 7 around the region, from the west side and from Portland as well. So if you do look at the 3 scenarios that Grace and Gene touched on, there's I think 5 or 6 or 7 that are very well position to all kind of compete for that kind of remaining amount that's left within the step 2 target. So sorry, that's not a specific answer, but there's several good ones around the region.
So are you saying that it could just be additive? Like if we're looking at option 1, option 3, that there's a way just to add, there's maybe a wiggle room. Certainly not with option 3, because it seems to already be over the budget, but with option 1 to add an additional project.
Yeah, I appreciate the question. It is a tough time because it's all fluid. I think from what I can tell, there one might find a smaller group of projects that are appearing in all 3 scenarios that have done really well over a few months, and those might total between 30 to 40 million, for example, of the 49 available. And so there's a remainder there where there's maybe another bucket that in the scenarios Metro has presented to date, some of them are purposely swapped out and traded to try to show the strengths of meeting different RTP goal areas. And I think that's the rub. That's the hard part, is finding a blend that meets all of the varying kind of program direction and goals. So I don't think it's necessarily additive, but I think the unfortunate reality is it's really hard conversations about the trade-offs between a couple of different projects. And that is true, I think, around the region. I do see that. I think it'll be a hard conversation among all the partners kind of this month leading into July.
Okay.
That's my honest take on it. Yeah.
Does anyone have any other questions for Jeff? Okay, we appreciate the update, Jeff. Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
Okay, and now Ted is here. Ted, welcome. We blew through the first part of our agenda, so we're a little early.
Great. Well, thank you, Mayor Buck, and thanks for having me this morning. And I apologize, I was coming from another meeting, so I was trying to come in here at just the right time. But looks like I've made it just in time after Jeff's briefing here. So I have for the TPAC workshop later this morning, where I'm going to cover the same topic, prepared a slideshow. I wasn't ready with that or prepared with that for your packet. I could do the slideshow, but I know that's also not your protocol to share slideshows necessarily if they're not included in the packet. So I could either do the slideshow if that helps you follow along with my presentation visually, or I could just give it orally, really sort of the preference of the committee.
And if I can chime in very briefly, Ted and I connected ahead of this meeting. An important nuance heading into today is that this is an off-sequence meeting. So our presenters had considerably less time to prepare than is typical for C4 Metro. If C4 Metro would like to receive the presentation today, then I will, after this meeting, get it posted to the website so that you're able to revisit it at your leisure.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, that sounds, does everyone want to see the presentation? Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Yeah, and this is everything in my presentation is part of the packet materials that were submitted. So should all be consistent. Although obviously with slideshows, I try to be a lot briefer with the language. Let's see. So I will go ahead and go into share. And hopefully I will be able to do this. Oh, let me go into presentation mode first. Oh, no, that's not working for me. You might see this in the presenter view, so apologies for that. Okay, can you see the slideshow now?
Yes.
All right. Okay, so again, this is about our MPO certification review report. And what the certification review is, something that the U.S. Department of Transportation reviews our metropolitan planning organization process every 4 years. It is conducted jointly at the federal level, but the two U.S. DOT divisions that participate in this are the Federal Highway Administration and the Federal Transit Administration. And so they jointly do it with both us at Metro and with the Southwest Regional Transportation Council, who is our MPO equivalent in Clark County, Washington, because we are, in the federal view, we are Portland area, Vancouver area is one urbanized area. So they approach the metropolitan planning process as a joint process. So we actually have a lot of planning coordination that we do with Southwest RTC as sort of our one urbanized area. So they, FTA, Federal Transit Administration, I'm going to say FTA, and Federal Highway, FHWA, staff come in and they basically, it's like an audit of our planning process. So the US DOT, they don't actually regulate the content of our planning work, but they do regulate our planning processes to make sure that they are consistent with federal rules and regulations. So after that, and they come in and they have us respond to a lot of long questionnaire. They come in and interview us. They conduct a public comment process. And then at the end, they issue what's called a review report that has a section of any corrective actions that we need. Well, first they have to actually say, can they certify that we are in compliance with the federal planning process as prescribed? And then so that's the first step, and we did receive that. And then they have some both corrective actions, which are things that we need to do differently by a particular date that they will specify. And then they also have a list of recommendations on just more things we could improve upon to as sort of like a best practices type of recommendation. So and then staff will actually of the MPO will actually draft an action plan to share with them to discuss what we will be doing to address the corrective actions themselves. That's the requirement. You'll see that we've actually included actions to also respond to the recommendations they've provided. So again, both Metro and Southwest Regional Transportation Council were certified as in compliance with the federal regulations, and we have drafted a draft version of the action plan to respond. So the corrective actions that we did receive fell into two categories. One is around requirements around Title VI, which has to do with civil rights regulations. And the other corrective action has to do with needing to do a financial strategy for implementation of all of the revenue projections that we did as part of the RTP. So the RTP has to be what we call financially constrained. So we do a revenue estimate, and that revenue estimate's over a 20-year period, and it can include revenues that are from sources that aren't in existing law. So we can assume things like that the state gas tax will grow over time, or that there may be a new bond measure if we can actually show that that's reasonable. And we do that in terms of putting the 20-year projection of revenues together. We then have to, for all the projects that are included in the plan, we need to have cost estimates for them and then show that the total cost estimates don't exceed the total projected revenues. So we have done that, but as then like a secondary part in addition to that is they want us to actually then go out and do a financial strategy to show what we are doing to actually implement our assumptions when we do our revenue forecast. So that was the second corrective action. So in the next RTP update, we'll need to make sure we include that. In terms of the Title VI related corrective actions, there's actually a Title VI report that we'll be adopting at JPACT in July that actually addresses almost all of the things mentioned in the Title VI corrective action. So we'll have those issues actually resolved in the next few months. So this is sort of a quick summary of the recommendations we received in the certification process. One is around practices on transit coordination, and I'll get into that in a little more detail in a minute. There was a recommendation about how we do project prioritization in the regional transportation planning process. So which projects get prioritized for inclusion in that financially constrained plan. There are some tool updates and refinements to how we conduct what's called the congestion management process. And just a quick overview, the congestion management process is really looking at and documenting where there are congestion issues, and then also laying out a strategy for how we're addressing congestion in the region. So those were mostly around making sure we had current strategies in our different corridor plans, and how we document those in terms of our approaches. And so that was the main part of that recommendation. They had some recommendations on how we organize and display our public participation tools, especially on our website, that sort of thing. And then the last one of note, significant note, is how that they recommend we prioritize projects in our Metropolitan Transportation Improvement Program, and describe more clearly how they support our regional transportation planning and federal performance measures. So then the draft action plan itself. So it is, again, required for the corrective actions, and it really identifies sort of the work program, aspirations, and strategies that we will put together and work on over the next 4 years before our next certification process, and then serves as sort of a guideline for trying to make sure we are addressing that in our annual Unified Planning Work Program, to make sure we're trying to identify resources to implement those actions. So then back more specifically to the recommendation around transit planning and representation, that was part of the recommendation. So this was something that was raised by a couple of agencies in Clackamas County during the public comment process of the certification process. There were some, again, recommendations that came forward on that. One was to ensure we had clearly defined our existing transit representation across our different bodies, working bodies and committees, and that we consider advisory board representation, mostly at the TPAC level, or other advisory bodies to both JPAC and the Metro Council, and that we could also strengthen our local planning agreements that we have in place to describe how we conduct transportation planning in the region, and make sure that we are getting good representation and agreement amongst the different agencies about how we do that. That local agreement, just so people further understand, is we do have a federally required planning agreement between Metro, the Oregon Department of Transportation, TriMet, and SMART. It's a 4-way planning agreement that we update once every, I also believe, 4 years, that describes how we carry out and conduct the federal planning requirements in our region. And so that's really, I think, what they were addressing there. We could also do other agreements between agencies if we found that desirable. So in the draft action plan, what we went into more detail on what we plan to do to address those recommendations, is to have establish a new hosted coordination at Metro with all of our transit service providers, as providing sort of a regional table for those folks to come together, those agencies to come together and talk about transit planning issues, and to do things like review the TPAC and JPAC work programs, and talk about work that needs to be completed to make sure that as transportation planning issues, related issues come to those tables, that the agencies have had a chance to have input and are prepared, and that we can, they are well aware of having the opportunity to have input as those issues come forward. We are looking at reviewing representation at TPAC and consider additional transit representation there. I think in the regional planning agreement that I just described, we're going to review the language that's in there that talks about how the four signatory agencies that I described can ensure that we have clear language in there about how we're going to cooperate and conduct transit planning issues at the regional level. And then the last one that we've put in there is really consulting with all these agencies and the JPAC members who represent them, and make sure that the JPAC members who do represent these transit interests have what they need to be prepared prior to meetings to ensure that the agencies have clear lines of communication in terms of presenting any issues that they may have for topics that do come to the JPAC table. So finally, on next steps, we're now in the process of gathering input on this draft action plan. We'll be sharing that action plan with the Federal Highway and Federal Transit Administration staff. That's what they've asked to see our action plan, so they understand how we're addressing it. And then we'll look to begin implementation of the action plan activities as we have can sort of spread that out as the resources allow us to start addressing those. And then those work items will get included in upcoming UPWP project descriptions, planning project descriptions as we move forward. And so that is my presentation. So I'll stop sharing and we can open it up for discussion and input from folks.
Thank you so much, Ted. Very helpful. Commissioner Savas.
Yeah, thanks, Ted. Just so you all know, we did meet with Ted and Councilor Lewis and Councilor Gonzalez and others Thursday morning at the county. Thank you for providing the materials and the discussion. We didn't get, we used up that hour, use up the whole hour. So I really appreciate the constructive dialogue that occurred there. Ted, I didn't have a chance last Thursday morning to ask this question, and maybe you could reply right now as it relates to the corrective actions. So once you answer, I've got some follow-up things I want to share with my colleagues, but can you just speak to the RTC corrective actions and just so I can better understand that?
Oh, so actually the Southwest Regional Transportation Council, the RTC, they did not receive any corrective actions. They received a longer list of recommendations, but they did not have any corrective actions. We, Metro, had the two corrective actions. I will put them in two bundles. One is the ones related to our Title VI, which is the civil rights sort of compliance. And then the second is related to ensuring that we actually have conducted a financial strategy on how we will try to ensure that the revenues we receive, that we forecasted in our revenue projections, will actually hopefully come to fruition. So those are the two corrective actions that we received.
Okay, so thank you. So what I want to kind of share overall is that I really feel, we expressed this a little bit Thursday morning, but I want to share with my colleagues here that I think we're missing a huge opportunity because I think we need to do more only because our MPO governance model is unique in the country. And I'm not talking about the elected aspect of it. I'm talking about the level of which any and all transportation related or air quality related agencies or jurisdictions are involved in other states, for example, are quite different, where virtually all jurisdictions and agencies have a voice and representation and there's a place in a table for everyone. And they're pretty intense, whether it's Seattle area or whether it's, SCAG, SCAG, and Southern California agencies of governments, Association of Governments, and all the MPOs are structured uniquely, but by and large, most MPOs in the country have pretty vast representation from all governments. So every government's got a voice. Here at our JPAC MPO, we've got one city and one commissioner from each county and one transit agency. So we're kind of skimpy, if you will. I'm not being critical, but we're kind of skimpy when it comes to representation. So I think we need to do more to get that to what I call the low-hanging fruit for improvements. Was it as it relates to our requirements as an MPO, air quality, safety, representation, Title VI, all of that. So a lot said, but I just want to flag that for everyone that, to me, getting smart on TPAC is a no-brainer. It should be something we should have done a long time ago, but at a minimum, we need to do that. And also advise you all that a number of the mayors in Clackamas County are really talking about what we can do to improve transit. And I think there's, again, a lot of low-hanging fruit that could really bolster TriMet ridership if there's better connectivity to it. And we've just got too large of a population in Clackamas County that has no access to transit. And we all are part of the global climate shed, frankly. So it doesn't make sense to leave us out in a meaningful way. And I'm not saying that Metro or anyone's doing that deliberately. It's just that the paradigm we're in is unique, and I'm not sure that we all are aware of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Mayor Melcher.
Ted, I wanted to ask you about your Title VI corrective action stuff. Metro has always struck me as an agency that looked at all of its planning work through the eyes of through the lens of equity and concern about serving underserved groups and marginalized peoples. How much of this Title VI feedback that you're getting is because those kinds of goals are no longer consistent with the way the current administration views non-discrimination? Is this process so long that it's kind of going under the old rules, or do you see the new rules applying?
Yeah, so I just want to make sure I explain the technicalities that the rules have not changed between administrations. I think how the administration emphasizes compliance with the rules might be viewed differently. I think this review was conducted basically under both administrations. It started under the Biden administration in terms of that review process. It concluded under the current Trump administration. So I would characterize it as the staff professionals at Federal Highway and Federal Transit Administration who conducted the review. They stuck pretty close to, are you following the letter of the law as it's written, as opposed to trying to interpret and emphasize particularly any particular policy objective that might come out of enforcement of the rules. And so the corrective actions that we received were pretty actually technical in nature. Just as an example, to give you an example of one is that to sort of demonstrate the technical nature is one of the corrective actions was that there must be a clear demonstration of access between our Title VI program manager, who would be somebody who would receive any Title VI complaints that might come in against us, to the administrator responsible for the compliance with federal actions at our agency, which is our chief operating officer, right? So that nobody could interfere between the person who would receive reports and the COO who would be communicating with the federal government and enforcing any corrective action that regulation that might come back down from it as a result of that. So it was mostly really kind of technical stuff that is actually fairly straightforward for us to correct.
Thank you, Ted. Thank you, Mayor. Could, how much, is it really, up to the region? Like, how much discretion does the region have in structuring JPAC as the MPO? It's like full discretion, just subject to.
Oh, I see. Yeah. So the structure of the MPO itself is designated by the governor at the instigation of the region. And so once that has actually been set, then it would take a whole big process that would be a concurrence between the region and a governor to reset it. So the existing structure was set in 1979. With the sort of creation of the modern regulations around MPOs.
I see. Well, I appreciate some of the ideas, for improved coordination, as the JPAC rep and whatnot. I mean, I have great, relationship with SMART and Dwight and I are in lots of meetings together, but there's no like direct effort to coordinate or whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, that is something, but I also think it's kind of a lot to put on just these reps, to carry the weight of, I mean, I'm representing the cities. I'm not a transit aide. I don't know the first thing, and I'm looking at the structure of JPAC. It's like we have 3 reps from the state of Washington, but so we can have 3 reps from the state of Washington. Why can't we have more reps helping to coordinate, the activities that are actually taking place down here in the region? I mean, it's great, to include the Vancouver area in our planning, but it seems like it's kind of, there's a little more weight over there, but then not, so much. Why not tell the Vancouver mayor, well, you can carry the weight, or WashDOT, you can represent both the city and CTRAN, at JPAC, because I feel like that's kind of what they're doing to the Clackamas City seat. Well, you can represent the cities and you can represent these other transit agencies. It's like, well, if I can do that, why can't WashDOT represent all the entrants of the state of Washington?
Mm-hmm.
Because I understand too, we probably don't want the table to get, too crowded, but it does seem worthwhile over the years, I guess, as things have, changed and transit has expanded to these different agencies from when JPAC was first created. There should be some adjustment to account for that. It seems, Mayor O'Neill.
I support all the comments that Commissioner Savas and Mayor Buck have already said about SMART having a seat at the table. I think it's important to have, especially also on JPAC, which we will be providing oral testimony tomorrow in support of trying to get SMART on JPAC. It's key for SMART and these other transit agencies to have more direct representation. Historically, we've had problems coordinating with TriMet. There's a lot of obstacles there. If we're trying to expand these goals, the federal obligations and things like that, we need to have that direct representation. I think it's to not have that direct representation as a clear oversight. Historically on JPAC, as Commissioner Savas and Mayor Buck might know, we had a mayor, Tim Knapp, who was on JPAC, for example, for a long time. And that he was just active. It was before SMART. And I think it was an oversight to not have, transportation, at least from the SMART level, on JPAC. So anyway, that's my 2 cents. So.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I'm curious too, and Ted, why is it like agency staff and not like a member of the TriMet board that sits, or a member of the OTC that represents ODOT? Is there a specific reason for that?
I think that was historically who represented those agencies even before the current configuration of JPAC. And I think when these were created, I think it was seen as the heads of those agencies had more immediate access to action, creating actionable support for the planning work itself and what would come out of the planning work. And so I think they were just seen as One, having the capacity because they were paid to do the jobs, as opposed to the boards of those agencies who typically were more volunteer and had other careers, and that they had more ability to participate and then actually follow through on actions from those agencies, and that was seen as desirable. And so I think that was sort of the historical reason why those agencies were represented by their, chief executives rather than a member of their boards.
Well, that's a great point. I guess that kind of goes straight into like why SMART should have representation and not through someone like me, who's also a volunteer who has to work a full-time job, and it's very challenging. Commissioner Savas.
Yeah, great conversation. I really appreciate the professionalism here this morning and the cooperative aspects of this. Just so that everyone knows, I wish we had Wes Lynn here this morning in Oregon City and others, but to be part of this dialogue. But the other odd thing that my seat represents, or my duty is written in the bylaws, is I represent our part of my job is to represent the rural transit agencies outside of the metro region, which is Sandy and Malala and Canby and so on, all others. But yet, to Mayor Buck's point, it's kind of like, oranges and apples. If you got electeds who are distant from the workings of transit, and yet you have the head of a transit agency who is, has that expertise, and we don't. We're not apples for apples, right? So, we ought to have both. There ought to be on the technical committees like TPAC, there ought to be I think that's where maybe the, department heads ought to be, and maybe the electeds ought to be electeds, because policy is driven by the policymakers, and the policymakers are the electeds typically. So, I'm not being critical, but it'd be an eye opener for all of us to look at other MPO governance models. And I'm not saying we change it, because it would take near an act of God. I get that. But I think we can make improvements and do a better job of it. And I think we really owe it now. So the last thing I'll say on this is that way back, and this is high level, it's not purely accurate, but my involvement in air quality started when I was a teenager. So I've been at this my entire life in one form or another in 3 states. So I will tell you that this whole structure began because of air quality, and at the time the air quality was carbon monoxide and hydrocarbons. And the world's changed a little bit. Now we discovered that CO2 is really the largest threat from a climate standpoint. That said, CO and hydrocarbons were localized. There was a local emissions that basically dissipated into the atmosphere, and weren't, and then broke down. However, CO2 is a global issue. It's not a local issue. So therefore, the remedies and the impacts, so it doesn't really matter where on the planet CO2 is being generated. It becomes a global impact. And so therefore, the boundaries we have, the commute shed we're talking about, that we were trying to have a conversation on, is got a greater involvement in a role than ever before. So the boundaries we currently have don't really, I don't think, mesh with the challenge we have from a global standpoint. That said, the other aspect I think we need to do is think about the RTP, and the RTP is basically based on projects. And Ted and I have talked about this a little bit, and Metro councilors and I have a discussion, and it's based on spending. If we spend the money on these projects, then we will get ideally some related result, whereas other systems or MPOs are looking at more performance metrics in the aspect that is not about spending, but about policies and metrics that actually deliver the results. And Southern California Association of Governments is a great example. And CARB, CARB, is the California Air Resources Board. If you look at their integration and what they do, they're actually moving the needle. And again, we can't change overnight, but I think we can look and say that we ought to be looking at a different structure. And when I say structure in this context, I'm talking about the RTP. I said a lot, it's kind of confusing, but I'll just leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Savas. And, oh, Mayor Milch.
I just appreciate that our packet today included letters sent back in December from both Wilsonville and from Commissioner Savas and Chair Buck on this issue of better representation. They're a good way to review and kind of get up on the topic, and I hope we'll keep pressing it.
Yes. Thank you, Mayor Milch. And we are talking, Ted, we're talking about this tomorrow at JPAC as well. Yeah, right.
Yes, correct. So this morning at TPAC and then tomorrow morning at JPAC.
Great. Okay. Well, thank you very much, Ted, for being here with us this morning. We
I
appreciate
appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you so much. All right, everyone. Let me get back here. Okay. We did our TPAC updates. Okay, so we're moving on to the MPAC updates here. MPAC, at our next we've just been kind of approving, there's kind of joint approval required for these locally preferred alternatives for the different projects, and they're all kind of these step one happen to be these step one projects. So it's 82nd Avenue, it's the TV highway, Montgomery streetcar project, and JPAC and MPAC both have to approve, or they give approval of these locally preferred alternatives. So anyway, we have that going on for both the TV highway project and the Montgomery Park streetcar project, and they've been coming and giving updates on those locally, those LPAs, and but it's approval time, and then they're going to give us an update on the placemaking grant program. I think everyone's familiar with that, and then I think Metro has seeded its future vision commission, or is about to seed it or whatnot. So they're going to report on that as well. Probably give an update on that process that they're going through. And yeah, that's what's going on at MPAC. And then Jamie, you're going to give us a transportation package update.
I sure am, but before I do that, I want to quick flag that in your packets today is an MTAC update. MTAC is the staff advisory body to MPAC, which includes representatives both from Clackamas County and from the cities. That update is included on page 144 of your packet today. I do want to flag that staff continues to do really good work on this committee. Some of the things that were discussed at the last meeting, and you'll see in this update, are some new grants that are available if your cities are interested in seeking grant funding, as well as an update on the regional housing coordination strategy and the draft transportation and land use measures in the comprehensive climate action plan. Please feel free to review this document after the meeting. Briefly about the transportation package, however, as many of you know, a major focus of the state legislative session has been the development of a state transportation funding measure. On Monday, the carrier bill, House Bill 2025, was introduced, and hearings are happening this week. Last night, June 10, was a hearing on ODOT accountability. Tonight, June 11th, is about transit, and on Thursday night, there's a hearing about operations and maintenance. There is still time to register to testify if you're interested in doing so, and written testimony can be submitted up to 24 hours after each hearing. The Joint Committee on Transportation Reinvestment, or JCTR, circulated a flyer last week that includes a framework of this draft package, but the best details continue to be in the bill itself. Presently, there's no analysis from the Legislative Fiscal Office, so the LOC and AOC are excellent sources for more localized analysis. Even the JCTR said analysis will be out later this week. Yesterday, Trent shared a few updates with our board, and the video should be online. One notable and consistent thread is that I-205 is named in the bill, funded through a new transfer fee. tolling is not named in the bill as a funding mechanism for I-205. Also, the state highway fund is being preserved except for the transfer fee, which means that 50-30-20 funding formula is still in place moving forward. Trent is out today, but he'll be back tomorrow, and he's happy to take any calls or try to answer any questions on the framework for other legislation. And that is the update we have.
Great. Okay.
The only thing I would add to that, and as a point I brought up yesterday, is that while the 205 lanes are mentioned in the bill and perhaps prioritized as, on the list, there's 4 or 5 incompleted projects from HB 2017. The amount of money with that transfer fee is inadequate to fund at least the 205 lanes project. So I don't know where the remainder would come from. And I don't know the time cycle of bond defeasance to where it would free up that transfer fee revenue annually. So my concern I mentioned yesterday was if that remainder small amount of money was, not enough and the project needed to move forward or did move forward, perhaps the governor's pause on tolling could be lifted and that augmented. So that's still a concern. It's not mentioned in the bill clearly, but without transit and without adequate transit in a network, people aren't going to have alternatives, and we're not going to be able to meet congestion pricing mentions that are spelled out as the remedy in the RTP for climate action. So transit is the basis, in my opinion, the basis and foundation of succeeding in many different ways. But I'll leave it there.
Thanks, Commissioner. All right. Any questions? Anything? Jamie, thank you so much for the update. All right. Well, do we get to get out of here a little early today? Nothing wrong with that, huh? Okay, we'll go ahead and adjourn. Thanks, everyone.
Briefly, real quick before we do adjourn, if I can jump in. Just brief reminder, we have a retreat on the 25th and 26th of July. If you have not made your reservation or RSVP already, I encourage you to please do so. That registration information is included at the end of today's packet.
Okay, great reminder. Thanks, Jamie.
Thank you, everyone.
All right, have a great day, everyone. See you soon.